Hey everyone, say hello to my little friend here. Okay, no more stupid jokes, I promise. Maybe. Recently acquired this little beauty here. Specifically, this is the Acmer S1 Mini laser engraver. Now, why do I have this thing? Long story short, I recently acquired a lot of hardwood for a really good price. Gave me the perfect chance to practice my woodworking skills without having to resort to buying Home Depot framing lumber. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with Home Depot lumber, mind you. After all, I did build a sort of a nice deck with it. It's just not what you want to use when you're making a nice looking cutting board, which I did. Made these 3 cutting slash charcuterie boards for Mother's Day, and for being my first real woodworking projects, I'd say they turned out okay, which got me to thinking maybe I can do something with my daughter and help teach her the entrepreneurial skills that I certainly don't have. After all, I gotta try and counteract the people that keep giving her stuff like this. Anyways, a few years back, I rented a booth at a small comic convention to sell off some of my video game collection. She helped me prepare everything, set up the table, talk to customers, and overall I think I had a bit of fun. Now I figure I can do the same thing again, but with wood projects. And don't worry, I'm not gonna let her operate the table saw, just the jointer. Now, after taking a glance at Etsy, seems that everyone is selling these cutting boards, and I need some kind of edge on the competition, so to speak. Then I remembered these things. Sure, other people are doing this too, but it's a much smaller pond. Plus, the kid likes to draw, and she knows how to use Krita and Canva and all that fancy stuff. So I figured she can create some wacky designs for me to engrave, and hopefully for other people to buy. However, wasn't too sure if I wanted to drop over $1,000 on something that may or may not work properly. I mean, sure, you see YouTubers doing all kinds of fancy stuff with these things, but are they only showing the small percentage of stuff that turned out okay? Is the machine difficult to set up? Was the software designed by a dyslexic chimp with ADHD? Do I have to recite litanies to the Omnissiah for it to work properly? Then I saw a bunch of these little mini engravers listed on Amazon for pretty decent prices. However, almost all of them were, well, brands of dubious origin, shall we say. Now, I'm sure there's probably nothing wrong with them, but I'm too old to waste time trying to save $1. Dollars I can make, time not so much. Now, there were 1 or 2 brands in there that I was familiar with, but I was feeling adventurous, and I did notice one other brand that didn't seem to be, well, generic junk, to put it bluntly. Brand I didn't recognize. Acmer. And if everything falls into place, I do love a good underdog story. So I dug a bit into them and found that they have an actual proper website and seem to make a decent lineup of products. However, I still wasn't too sure about the limitations of the small engravers, and I'm still thinking, what if I end up wanting the big engraver instead? And what was I going to do with 2 of them at that point? So I hatched a cunning plan, decided to contact Acmer to see if I could get a review copy of this mini printer, was going to test it out, do this same review, and I was fully prepared to have to send this thing back and then decide if I was going to buy the full-sized one or if the small one would work. Acmer, however, told me that not only would they send me the mini engraver, but I could keep it. And I appreciate that, but rest assured, this is going to be an honest review from someone who's a complete newbie to all of this. So, with that long-winded rambling out of the way, let's start. This thing was packaged really nicely. Lots of protective foam. Setup was literally me just slotting this laser assembly right here into that groove, plugging in that cable right there, and tightening the screw, and that was it. Now, you do need to manually adjust the laser every time you change material. The laser needs to be about 2 millimeters above the height of the material for it to focus properly. All you do is slacken the screw right here, lift it up, pop this little spacer in, drop the laser down carefully, tighten the screw, and remove the spacer. Takes like 5 seconds and pretty much foolproof. In terms of software, they advise you to use either Lightburn or Laser Gribble, Laser Gerbil, this thing. Been using the free trial of Lightburn and haven't had any compatibility issues so far. Did play around with Laser Gerbil, I guess, but that one's got a bit of a steeper learning curve. However, I'm cheap and that's free, so I may end up switching to that in the end. But there is a third option as well, sort of. While I was on their site, there was mention of a piece of software that Acmer were creating to use with their own laser engravers. However, it's still in beta, so I didn't expect it to be perfect. So this is a much simpler piece of software compared to Lightburn and Laser Gerbil, but comparatively a lot easier to use and set up. For example, to connect to the engraver, I just click here, pick the COM port, and it's already picked it up. Then I just go to product type, and I pick the S1 model, which is what this is. And now this is the really neat part that I like. I can go here under material. I've got the 6-watt diode, and let's say I have no idea what the speed and power settings should be for the material I'm using. Let's say I'm using metal, stainless steel, thickness 1. I just do that, and this thing has now configured itself automatically to work with that material. Don't have to go look up or learn anything. Not that you shouldn't, but it is an option. And comparatively, this is a piece of software I'd feel comfortable having the kid use without worrying about her potentially burning down the house. But like I said, this thing is in beta, and I did have issues with it losing connection halfway through a burn when I was using this old laptop here. The new computer that I built didn't have that issue, so I'd probably blame that on this 10-year-old laptop rather than the software. Quick update regarding that last point. Spoke to Acmer, and they did acknowledge that they've seen that issue before, and there should be a patch coming out in a couple of days to hopefully correct that. But again, remember, the software is beta and it's being actively developed. In any case, no real problems with any of the software. Me, on the other hand, what happened is I didn't want to waste the good sample wood on my first test burn, and I had plenty of cardstock, so I figured, let me get my feet wet with that instead. What happened was this. The laser was on, but nothing was happening. And I was pretty sure that Acmer didn't decide to pull a practical joke on me. So I went and tried a piece of cardboard instead, which worked. I then decided to go formulate my own crackpot theory as to why the cardstock didn't work, and decided the cardstock might have been too light colored and maybe reflecting a lot of the laser away. So how to fix that? More power, obviously. Then I may have cranked it a little bit too high, as this happened. Note that it didn't actually catch fire, but it did burn a hole right through there. So while this was a technical failure on my part, this at least did let me know that I could feasibly use this thing as a laser cutter, with cardstock at least. Also, hot tip for you, or not so hot I should say, but you can use one of these silicone baking sheets here to protect your table in case you do dumb stuff like me. It's also excellent as an anti-slip surface. I rarely have to push in this thing just to get it to move, and it'll help to hold the workpiece in place as well too. Also, there was one other thing that slightly confused me at the beginning, and I'm sure a couple of you might be wondering about this as well. This is my dusty 3D printer, and that's an SD card slot right there. That SD card slot lets me load up whatever design I want to print without me needing to connect it to a PC with a USB cable. That way, if the PC crashes or if Bill Gates decides to reboot my computer, the printer can still keep on going rather than crapping out halfway through a 20-hour print. And as stupid as this sounds, this thing is essentially a two-dimensional 3D printer with a different type of head. So I kind of expect to find the same features, but there's only USB on it, which kind of makes sense when you think about it. I think the longest burn I've done on this little guy is about 25 minutes. Plus, unlike a 3D printer, this isn't the kind of device you want to leave running unattended while you go grocery shopping, because as you know, you're literally playing with fire with this. And from what I've come to understand, the larger versions of these things do have SD card slots, but I'm guessing that's more to stop you from losing your work in case of a PC crash. You're still not supposed to leave them unattended. So I played around with this thing for a bit in the basement, engraving on cardstock and cardboard. And in case you're wondering, I did sort of get the cardstock dialed in. eventually. And I gotta say, one feature that I really like about Lightburn is similar to Photoshop. You can have layers on this and different elements on each layer. So each one of these lines and the picture of the robot is on a different layer, as you can see here. I can have it do an outline, have it fill, have a different speed and power, and if I don't want to include an element, I just toggle that output switch right there. And that was really useful during testing. I could put a different setting on each line, kind of play around with what works and what doesn't. And at that point, the wife came home and said the house smelled funny. So after I'd finished gaslighting her, I then quietly moved the entire setup into the garage. Now, I did have a ventilation fan with a carbon filter in the basement, but paper and cardboard seem to produce quite a sharper smell when burned compared to wood. So keep that in mind. Also, my wife has a nose like a bloodhound. So I resumed my experiments in the garage and decided to move on to wood. Now, while I do have a lot of wood, I'm not going to pointlessly waste it. So the first test piece was this warped piece of walnut here. Now, wasn't expecting perfection with this at all, as this curve here was going to mean that the focal length of the laser wouldn't be consistent across the entire burn. However, did a pretty darn good job, I gotta say. Way better than I expected. Only flaw was the sort of curving of the text right there, but that's because the wood's also curved. And considering that this thing isn't meant for curved surfaces, I'm impressed that the laser managed to keep focus properly on the ends of the workpiece and not go all wonky. So with this under my belt, decided to move on to a normal piece of wood now. So flat piece of some type of wood, and I did use the layer function on Lightburn to play around with what works and what doesn't. And I gotta say, even on wacky fonts like this one here, did a pretty good job. And in any case, like I mentioned, this is the 6-watt version of the engraver, but for all the pieces I've done so far, I haven't gone above 50% power. Actually, I'm lying. This fairly deep one here, I believe, was at 75% power. This one was 50% power, and I think nothing on this was above 40% power. Also, forgot to mention this, but all these pieces of software, I believe, have this framing function right there. So let's say I have no idea where to place the material there. I'm just going to click the frame function. And that thing will basically draw a border with the laser powered off, of course, and show me exactly where it's going to be doing its business, which was a crucial feature for the next test. You see, I haven't been entirely honest about what sold me on this brand and made me contact Acmer. You see, on the Amazon page for this thing, they have this video right here that caught my eye. Now, I don't care how jaded you are, this is cool. I mean, they claim that you can use this thing to engrave a picture onto a leaf. I mean, of course, probably not practical, but still cool. Now, mind you, I'm sure the person that did that has infinitely more experience fiddling around with the settings than I do, but I wanted to give it a shot. So, for the final test, I acquired 6 leaves right here, and on a side note, we've had a very peculiar spring so far. Getting a hold of these leaves was actually a lot more difficult than you'd think. All the leaves in my garden are about this size, and I had to end up driving to my parents' house to defoliate their trees. And I want to stress, I fully wasn't expecting this to work. I mean, all I had was a few hours of using this thing, plus a few harebrained theories on how to tweak the power settings. First test was to just draw a box and write the word test on a leaf. However, it seemed to perforate the leaf more than it was engraving it. So, second test, I dialed the power from 20% down to 12%, and it came out okay this time. I mean, considering that I was using a leaf. Third test, and because I didn't want to run out and steal more leaves, use that same leaf again and try to engrave that image right there of a stubby little pencil, and it seemed to work. And for the fourth test, I used this website right here to generate an AI headshot. So that's a person that does not exist, and I try to print that onto this leaf right here. However, ended up looking more like something out of a horror movie, so a bit of a fail with that one. Now, I wasn't sure if it was the fact that I was using a new type of leaf, or if this was just too much to ask of this thing, but I was beginning to lose hope, and I was down to 2 leaves. So I did some prep work, decided to go back to the old faithful maple leaf, sandwiched the leaf between two pieces of wood for about an hour, just to try to flatten it out as much as possible, and slowed the movement speed from 50 millimeters a second to about 25, and then said a prayer to the machine spirit. And that's when I noticed this little function right here, negative image. And when I thought about that, I realized that is probably the missing ingredient right there. And I want to say, after this fiasco, I was not expecting much. But yeah, here's my live reaction to this. Okay, moment of truth. See how it looks when we hold it up to the light. Holy crap. You guys got to see this. Take a look at that. Wow. I actually did it. No word of a joke, that is amazing. So yeah, I had actually done it. Turns out that that video wasn't just marketing BS. Now, what am I going to do with this knowledge? I have absolutely no idea. If you got any suggestions, let me know. I'm sure there's tons more dumb stuff I can do with this thing. And by the way, here's that same leaf a day later. Still looks pretty good. And I know I keep saying this, but this is amazing right here. It's literally a photograph on a leaf. And don't forget, we haven't even gotten to that sixth and final leaf. So, what happened to it? Well, a little bit anticlimactic with that one. The kid took it for an art project and I never got to engrave it. Still, I mean, I managed to put a photograph on a leaf. To me, that's freaking amazing. Now, I want to stress that I'm not making any sort of money by recommending this thing to you. I could very well make that link down there in the description, a referral link, and get some commission, but I'm not going to. Why not? Because I'm dumb. Because if I stand to gain from you buying something, I don't feel right telling you to go and buy that said thing, which probably is a dumb way to look at it. I don't know. That said, if we look at the Amazon page right here, there's actually 3 models, 2.5 watt, 3.5 watts, and a 6 watt, which is this one right here. Now, for the most part, I barely ran this thing at 40% power, so I definitely wasn't using the full capabilities of that laser. That said, you're going to get a lot more life out of your laser by running it underpowered. Remember, if you're constantly running the laser close to the max output all the time, it is going to shorten that lifespan. So, even if you don't need a 6 watt laser, if you can afford it, I would highly recommend you get this version. However, this is your money and your call. You've got to know your needs and your budget. Yep, you can save 60 bucks by buying the 2.5 watt model, but is it worth it in the long run? Like I said, this is your call. Do your research and see what'll work for you. Anyways, entirely by coincidence, I swear, these things are on sale on Amazon right now. If that sale's over, they've given me this code right here that you can punch in when you're checking out to get 30 bucks off of this 6 watt version. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even realize coupon codes were a thing on Amazon until right then and there. And just to be transparent, I have no idea if I'm going to be getting some sort of commission check or anything from you using that coupon code. I doubt it, but just in case, I'm going to do a follow-up video or a short where I donate any money they might potentially give me. Why? Look, I basically got a free laser engraver out of this whole deal, and I'm not greedy. So if you found this video useful and you actually ended up buying one of these things, drop a comment below and let me know that you did, because I got no way to track it now. In any case, thanks for watching. Take care. Okay, so a little bonus content for you. Now, this is something you're entirely not supposed to do with this, but this is for science. This is a piece of rusty steel. I'm going to run the laser at 5 different power levels. Basically, going to draw 5 circles, starting at 10% power and going up to 50% power on the last one right there. What'll happen? I have no idea. So let's frame this out. Looks like we're good. Let me get you guys a front row seat, and starting now. Okay, let's see how this turned out. Surprisingly good, actually. I'll give it a bit of a wipe with some isopropyl alcohol. And it looks like once we hit 30% power, started to do a bit of a decent job clearing off that rust. I think just for giggles, I'm going to do 2 more. So I'm going to do one more at 75 and another one at 100. And we'll see how that turns out. And yeah, I should mention this thing is a little bit greasy as well. So if you've got a piece of rusty metal and you're incredibly lazy, you could feasibly use this thing as a laser rust remover. Though it'd probably take you a heck of a long time and probably burn that laser out. In any case, thanks for watching again. Take care.